The Renault Ep.3, first modern tank, the absolute legend of the First World War that somehow managed to see combat even into the 90s. Hello and welcome to Tank Talks, and let's dive right into some context. In 1916, when this tank was to be designed, the tanks of the world looked like this. Boxy, slow-moving heaps of rather thin armor with many design flaws leading to unfortunate deaths on the battlefield. Of course, the French in particular wouldn't test their not-so-good boxes in battle before the spring of 1917, but Colonel Etienne, the father of French tanks, had already envisioned a new project. He wanted lighter tanks, less manpower and resource heavy, that would swarm and overwhelm the enemies, leading to victory. While the British and their Whippet had started around the same time, the British idea was for a lighter tank to exploit breakthroughs, not to overwhelm them, as Etienne wanted to do with his Wonder project. Etienne then went up to Louis Renault, one of the founders of the Renault company and its chief engineer, to pitch his idea to him. Though reluctant at first, as the factories were producing at full capacity, he did accept in late 1916, changing the history of armored warfare forever. To say that the Renault Ep.3 was revolutionary would be an understatement of the century. From the rotating turret, a separate crew and engine compartments, and many other minor design practices today still have their roots in this tank. And I should point out that it hurts to say this, as Louis Renault was a collaborator during the Second World War. So, yeah, it sucks. This tank was built around its Renault car engine, a slim engine with a new carburetor which ensured the engine kept running even if the tank was climbing at a steep angle. The engine compartment was separated by a metal layer, keeping the crew safe from suffocation and poisoning, though it was still loud AF, which resulted in the main way for the commander to order the driver to do something being to simply kick him. I kid you not. The driver sat in the front, in his seat operating the tank, with the commander behind him operating the turret, the gun or the machine gun, and commanding. A rather busy man. Originally the turret was riveted, while cheaper left it a hazard for the crew, leading to the more famous cast turrets, which were more difficult to produce but far superior. And finally, its main armament was either a rapid-firing 37mm Pitot gun or the Hotchkiss machine gun. While there were problems with the engine early on, they were mostly fixed once it first saw combat on the 31st of May 1918 at the Battle of the Forest of Rats, at the Third Battle of Ain. Germans managed a breakthrough in that area and were pushing into the rear when 30 Renault Ep.3s engaged, halted, and then routed the Germans, easily executing a spontaneous counteroffensive through the woods, something the previous tanks could only dream of. However, it would be during the 100 Days Offensive in 1918 that it started to shine, as the war transitioned to the open ground and it thrived there, swarming the Germans and earning their name of the Victory Tank. Even before the war ended, many nations had started eyeing the Renault Ep.3. The US acquired a license and produced the M1917. Italy purchased a few and built the licensed copy Fiat 3000. The Russians, or the Soviets, had the unlicensed copies of the Ruski Renault and the MS-1. Many other nations bought some or considered buying some. Afghanistan and Japan purchased some, while Sweden chose a cheaper option of getting the Leichter Kampfwagen 2 or the LK2. In the end, solely due to it being cheaper. Around 3,700 Renault Ep.3s were produced by France, and with the post-war French economy being sluggish and the French left-wing government distrusting the right-wing military leadership, there were issues with getting newer tanks, leading to the good old Ep.3s getting into a few modernization schemes that ultimately led nowhere. One modernization scheme, the Renault Ep.3 model 1931, resulted in the old Hotchkiss-armed Renault Ep.3s getting a new Reibel machine gun. In the interwar years, it first fought in the Rif War, an uprising in the Spanish-occupied northern Morocco, which was brutally put down. It also fought in the Russian Civil War. After that came the Chinese Civil War, the Manchurian Incident, and the Second Sino-Japanese War, where it saw limited use. However, it truly showed its age in the Spanish Civil War, where some Spanish and then French and Polish provided ones were obliterated as they were too slow to run away and too thinly armored, being swallowed up in the close quarters city combat and the not-so-final terrifying chapter, the Second World War. In a conventional battle against modern militaries, it was absolutely useless as shown by the Spanish Civil War. For example, looking for more tanks, despite many modern ones, France mobilized around 500 Renault FT tanks to fight in 1940 to protect the airfields and the strategic targets, only for the previously pointed out flaws to make them suffer against the German infantry and panzers, standing no chance. Those Renault FTs captured by the Germans across Europe were used to defend airfields or in anti-partisan warfare. Some had their turrets removed and mounted on the Atlantic Wall. All the good that did them. And in 1944, as the Allies approached Paris, some Renault FTs were mobilized by the Germans to fight the French insurrectionists that tried to claw back some prestige, in order to at least say that they helped liberate Paris, as intelligence work isn't that flashy. After this, these tanks disappeared from the front lines. However, life is not logical. Afghan Renault FTs had their final battles quite recently, used as static gun emplacements against the Soviets. Don't know how or why, as the armor is paper thin, but it did happen. And that is all. Thank you all so much for watching. If you had enjoyed it, please like and subscribe, and Pozdra!